Cześć! Dzisiaj będzie trochę nietypowo. Czy słyszeliście o inwestorze z Azji, który przemierza Europę na rowerze w poszukiwaniu innowacji w zakresie zrównoważonego rozwoju i dekarbonizacji? No ja też nie, ale dzięki pomocy Tomka Wierzchowskiego udało nam się skontaktować i porozmawiać trochę o startupach oraz inwestowaniu w nie na bardzo wczesnym etapie rozwoju. Cały materiał będzie oczywiście po angielsku, ale znajdziecie w nim polskie napisy. Z tego też powodu wypuszczam go trochę poza swoim normalnym grafikiem. W tej rozmowie poznacie perspektywę nietypowego młodego inwestora, która mam nadzieję będzie dla Was interesująca. Zapraszam. Hello everyone. Today we're talking about startups and the international perspective on the startups, on the founders. Today I have with me Jia from the Turn Off, Turn On Ventures. Hello there.
Hello, Mateusz.
Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure.
You're on your crazy trip along the Europe. You're driving on a bike and you're meeting with founders on the way. Can you tell me, how did you come with such an idea?
Well, it's a weird story, weird background story, but to put it simply, it's a dream come true. I literally dreamt it up in my sleep, dreaming of riding on the open roads, kind of in the countryside, and meeting someone who's also riding, having a chat along the way. We stop for coffee. He tells me that, I'm a founder in a company. This is what the company does. And we have a chat as well, and I decide that, hey, maybe I'd be interested to invest. And I woke up and I said, well, this is not that far-fetched or crazy a dream. It can happen, so why not give it some more thought and see if it can be true? And now I'm here in Katowice.
I mean, that's an amazing story. Coming from a dream to a reality. And right now we're meeting in Katowice and you're having, I believe that's the halfway for you. So you're planning to spend a few more months to get into the Amsterdam from Sofia, as far as I know. I believe the goal of your trip is to find out the interesting ventures, like some of the interesting founders and startups, but you're specialized. What you're specialized in?
Yeah, so myself, this trip really is specializing in climate and sustainability. And the idea is we're not really looking at things in a very structured or methodological way of climate and the way much larger investors or much more professional investors are looking at it. Because we invest in the earlier stages, and in fact the earliest stages of companies, when they're raising maybe the very first time they're raising money, or when they're raising from friends and family. Okay. We're looking at that space, and sometimes we think there needs a bit more flexibility around what is climate and what is sustainability. For me, if they're doing something that is positive for the climate, could be water, could be air, could be energy, could be lesser energy, so energy efficiency. These all make sense to me as an important step towards solving climate issues and climate problems. That's where we focus on.
Perfect. Some of the viewers of my channel, they're founders, they're to-be founders. I got some questions, some from of my friends that are already running startups. Just to make things a bit more clear for those that are outside of the startup bubble, I wanted to ask the early stages. By the early stages, you mean the ideas at the pre-seed level or a seed level, right? So the guys that never got any money or that they're taking their first money in order to start the company.
Pretty much, we go all the way from idea stage. So
okay, even
before the company exists.
Perfect.
I'm super happy to speak to founders. I'm super happy to learn about what ideas people have. In fact, I have spoken to multiple people who've come to me and say that I'm not sure I should be a founder. And we talk for 2 hours about that. To me, it's completely fine because this is how I learn from people as well. This is how I learn about their ideas, where it goes, how it might grow, or how it might not grow. I enjoy the whole process. And in terms of rounds, we've invested mostly pre-seed and before, to the point that pre-seed might be considered the latest we get involved in.
Right.
Yeah, so in industry terms, it will probably be deemed as first check, which is the very first external money that a startup or a founder gets. Or even before that, friends and family round. So if we kind of get news and understanding that, oh, they're actually speaking to their friends and family to kind of kick off that journey. And we're interested in the idea, we would like to speak and say that, hey, we could join in that round as well and support you because we believe in what you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the explanation. I believe that's a very risk-taking perspective, but I see that there are more and more specializations of the different ventures. Also, I believe the method that you're having is a bit of a lean startup, speaking openly about your idea because maybe something will spark up. I want to find out, you're entering the climate, there are some ideas that you want to find out. This is because of the funds that are investing you are specialized in that. With that, I want to make a question. Why do you believe funds started specializing in specific things? Because years ago, I remember everybody was investing in everything, but what is the reason right now you're so specialized?
Okay, my personal reason for specializing in climate is because I believe it's important.
Yep.
And I think I say that objectively. I say that it's important not because I know it's important, but because the science says that it's important. Yep. The personal reason as to why I'm doing climate is kind of off, right? Because I'm not particularly trained in the climate. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chemist. A lot of times when I hear about a new idea, my background knowledge comes from when I was 15 years old.
Okay.
Right, that's half my life ago. And as most people will know, the further away it is, the more it decays. It's not linear.
Yeah, that's true.
You lose most of it maybe in the first 3 years. So I on that personal level, because climate is such an important issue, I'm also using this opportunity to learn, to educate myself.
Yep.
Right, and there are two ways to education. I can educate, pick up a textbook, learn the fundamentals, which I sometimes have to do, maybe accelerated ways on YouTube or articles. But another way is really to speak to people who have 10 years, 7 years doing their PhD, and they're at the forefront of technology with their new idea, right? So I educate myself in both directions, from the most fundamental, what is a battery on YouTube, and from the battery expert with a completely new idea that I have to sign an NDA for, right?
To learn more.
Yeah, so both directions, and I believe that in this process, I can grow as a more informed person about the climate to be able to also then invest in a higher quality way.
Ideas. Great. I mean, that's a win-win situation. When I'm looking at it from that perspective, climate is, it's reasonable for everybody to get into climate and have an impact on it. I'm just wondering, whenever you're in a situation like that, you're meeting somebody with a crazy idea, future-proof batteries, based on graphene or something, you'll need to have some way to evaluate, the startups. And also one of my friends that is a founder in one of the startups that I'm cooperating with, they asked me, hey, what's your approach to the evaluation? Do you use some specialists? Do you have a consortium of people? Is there any intuition that you have that is related to that?
I think, okay, let's split it into two parts. One of it is specialized knowledge, and then the first topic of intuition. Right, and intuition is almost linked to gut feeling, and gut feeling often comes faster than maybe doing research. I think in angel investing, there's often a lot of gut feeling because one, the idea is not fleshed out. Two, the idea will pivot and change massively in the next 5 years.
Always, yeah.
Right, so if there are real conceptual pivots, then maybe the fundamentals of the science is sort of sufficient to understand the theme and the importance of making a change in this field versus how perfect this idea can be. Because ideas, when executed, are often not perfect in the first try. So that's on gut feeling. And then the in-between, right? Gut feeling and technical knowledge. Before talking about external technical knowledge, I think gut feeling improves when you improve your own technical knowledge. Right, and that's what I'm working on. So when I travel, when I meet new startups, I always open the table and say that, hey, I'm a student here. in your world, I'm an idiot, right? Because you could read me out a basic formula and I'm still gonna have to like pull it out of my mind and draw the connections. But I feel it. I feel that I am slowly getting better step by step. And one thing I realized from the gut feeling perspective, this is just popping up on my mind, is that not knowing the field in super in-depth ways, it's not exactly a bad thing. Because then the founder needs to explain their idea
in a simple
to a kid.
Yeah.
And that elegance of simplicity, and you're in cybersec and a lot of coding, right? Like elegance comes in simplicity.
That's true. Right.
So that is almost one of my filters that's related to gut feeling, because if I can understand it as a kid, as a kindergartner in my head, it helps me want to know more, and then I'll dig deeper, and then I go into that technical sort of evaluation. This I speak for myself because my approach is so different. I don't have an organization. I don't have people I hire. I don't have a pool of funds that can pay for specialists to tell me if something is a great idea or not. And so what do I do? For me, I prioritize a process that is win-win, that people can also benefit from. And I already know that at angel stage, things are so fluid and fluctuating and can diverge, right? So I allow myself to bear that risk of not knowing 100% of it.
Sure.
But I increase closer to 100%, maybe I hit 55%, 65%, by working with a new student. Like maybe if it's a material science company, I find on LinkedIn like someone who just graduated looking for a job, and I say, hey, like here, I have this budget and I'm looking at startups. I want to help the climate. You studied something that can help the climate. This is a small pool of money. Take whatever time you need that you think is worth this amount of money to validate this concept.
Nice.
Right? And if I tell you this concept, or you take this material, you convert it into this, and this will change the world because
of that
X, right? In this one sentence, it could either blow your mind because wow, that's revolutionary, or it could blow your mind because wow, that's nonsense. It cannot happen in physical world, right? And often, like like a undergrad or master student could potentially like highlight the scientific BS sometimes, and I use that method really also for my own education in the end. Yeah. On the VC question though, I wanted to highlight that. So I think the trend of generalist VCs, and this is just my opinion, was that many VCs probably came from hiring a team of people in finance, people going from sell-side investment banking jobs, finding opportunities in buy-side, having a more manageable lifestyle, and honestly an interesting job, like a super interesting job. You're learning something new every day. So their job is to invest in good ideas, right? And good teams and make money out of that. But then how would you, then they have to learn each individual sector, whatever comes to their laptop, to their emails.
Yeah, impossible.
Yeah, and I think after that we realized that, hey, like there might be some companies, that some investments that were made that shouldn't have been allowed in the first place, because I mean, vision is great, ambition is great, but there are some things you cannot change in the physical world, right? You cannot break certain truths, and that's where I think, especially in the hardware space and the science space, like the technical prowess and specialism comes in, where a professor, somebody who has developed many, let's say, filtration techniques and materials, like that experience is invaluable, and they come in as a venture partner in a VC fund, and then slowly when that trend develops, it's like, I can be my own partner, I can build my own fund. Yeah. Which I think is good in its own way, to be able to be a bit sharper in decision making. And
that's the advantage, come on.
Yeah, and to support the startups, right? Like actually support on the technical level.
So Jia, I completely buy your argument, like the idea of being more specialized to build the knowledge. I'm wondering, like,
for the people that are just starting their journey with the startups, the process that you're doing is basically scouting. So you're bumping into the people, different kind of people, trying to find out if they have an idea that is worth investing. Like, I believe the way you're scouting by driving a bike across Europe is quite unusual. I'm just wondering, like, the next step that is usually happening is like the people are coming to you and pitching. So in the COVID days, everybody was pitching through the Zoom. Does pitching, not online, but in person, help you with the feeling of guts or feeling the founders, the idea makers?
I think pitching online and pitching in person is very different. I'm very lucky and very fortunate that founders can pitch one-to-one. And often I tell founders that the pitch process that they're going through with me is not, like, it's not a pitch in the sense that if you walk away, you're losing your round. Like, as one angel investor who invests in small tickets at the earliest rounds, like, the money actually does not value add that much in the grand scheme of things, right? And I've had many founders, startups who are at later stage and they see, oh, angel investor, right? They want to pitch, and then they hear about the ticket size and they're like, okay, like, that's not going to help me at all. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but that was the reaction. And that's fine, because I know the group of people that I want to spend time with. And I always tell them, like, this is not about, the value add is not from the check that's being written. The value add is from the opportunity in this time to spend time to like poke holes and make improvements and face tough questions without any downside loss. Because I'm not, I don't know, Andreessen Horowitz or another big VC that I'm going to say no, and then 15 other funds say no because I said no, right? The best time now is to use this opportunity as practice. And in the end, if I really like it, despite it being practice, then I will follow up. And then a few weeks later, a month later, whatever it is, maybe you're not even raising a round, maybe 8 months later, right? I get to be an investor and be supportive because we had that 1 hour to poke holes, to build, and to be completely honest with each other. Like, I really want to do this strategy and I think this is what's next, but what do you think? Right? Like, it's fine to pause the pitch, like, halfway to just discuss that, because the time is yours to use. And that's my method.
I know that in Google they're saying fail early in order to avoid, some of the paths that can be very costful. My perception on what you're saying, and I believe that's one of the advices to the people that are getting into the startups, is like, this has a certain network effect. Once you'll get into there on the very early stage of a startup, and you're also having a network of the other funds that you know, it helps the founders to get the future rounds, right? Do you have any experience with situations like that, a domino of the network effect that impacts the founding the next rounds?
I honestly, I'm kind of way too new into this space to be experiencing future rounds at this point of time. I do have a startup that is raising a future round, and I am finding a new VC fund who is aligned with them both in mandate, but also in people matching and behaviorally matching them both from a startup and VC. So it's in the process now. So we'll see where that leads to. But once again, like, this is the process, right? This is me learning, and maybe next time I can share with you a good experience or a not so good experience, and hopefully everyone learns from it.
One of my friends that will be founder very soon would like to learn a bit more about what is the characteristic of the founders that you value the most, and is there anything that can be within the founders' characteristics, like the way they're behaving, their approach, that might be blocking the growth of the company?
For me, the first thing I try to spot is whether a founder is coachable. And that's a broad word, because different people define coachable differently. But obviously, if I'm intending to invest, I would like the founder to be coachable by people that I believe can coach him. don't make the assumption that I'm the coach, because who am I to be a coach? But it's a certain character, and I think this kind of coachability is observable when you spend time with the founders long enough, having conversations, asking questions, and I mean having conversations and asking questions beyond the startup, right? When you have a meal with them and they're discussing something about education, how they see it, and when someone gives a response that is kind of fighting what they're saying, how they absorb it, how they think about it, and how they rebut. I think these are all sort of things that need to be observed outside of the pitch deck and demo days and recorded videos and all that. It's in a human side of behavior. A different element of coachability, I think, is humility as well. I really enjoy spending time with founders that like blow my mind when I deep dive certain topics with them, because they are so knowledgeable and so humble about it, right? To the point that sometimes I feel like the people they hire have maybe more ego than them.
Yep.
Right? And they're fine with it, because they're like, well, I hired this person because I value him for what he is and what he brings to me. Doesn't matter. There's something I can learn from this guy. And I said, like, wow, okay, good. I like, great. And I think maybe the last thing is to observe how much they love the problem. And that means that they are able to take their brain away from what they are building to solve the problem. So they can detach from the solution building and focusing on the problem, because the problem existed before they built the solution. And they must enjoy the problem. They must like discuss and say, hey, this guy tried to solve the problem this way, but it's really good for the first 2 years. How do you scale beyond that? And they enjoy that whole discussion of the problem, right? And even to the point they're like, oh, if our startup didn't exist, it means the problem is solved, and that's great, right? And I like that kind of spirit. And of course, there are many other things that other investors will prioritize. So this is not a rule. Yeah, it's just something that I appreciate as an angel investor. And conversely, what blocks growth from the company, especially at such an early stage, is thinking you're right.
Always right.
Thinking you're right. I mean, I think founders need conviction in what they're doing for sure. But having that one ear open to respecting what other competitors are bringing to the table kind of opens a lot of doors, because you never know when your competitor is your next hire, right? Or 3 years down, your competitor is absorbed into your company, or you are absorbed into your competitor.
That's true.
That's going to be ugly if like 3 years ago you have this YouTube video where you and yeah, just keeping that open ear and open mind is keeps the roads open as well.
Thank you very much. Like I would summarize it as a growth mindset, because I've heard the coachability a lot, and I believe some people are stubborn in a specific way when they are not able to, adapt to the ever-changing world, and some people are stubborn in a nice way when they're able to absorb the changes and they can make the change in the product into the thing that they're building. I resonate with your way of thinking a lot. Thank you for that. The next question that I got was like, what would be the 2 best pieces of advice that you could give to the founders at the very beginning of their startup path?
2 best pieces of advice.
A lot of coffee, right?
I'm not sure that's good for the startup in the long run. I think at the start there's a tendency, an itch to do a lot, and I feel that choosing one thing to work on in one time is probably a good idea. Product-wise, I think running a company is always you need to be like an octopus and have like dog and do many things at the same time. But just from a company product building perspective, like the MVP, just do that one thing first, get it out there, find your fit, adjust, instead of I'm going to serve 5 segments of 3 markets
from the very beginning.
Yeah. It's good to have that mindset, like the international mindset, or that scalability mindset. But when you're building, like build it block by block, like Lego.
Absolutely.
That's one. I'm trying to recall.
Just a little break, like for the people that don't know the terms, MVP is minimum viable product. So totally the minimum value that you can provide to the market and somebody will like it or even better buy it and appreciate it. So whenever you're trying to find the MVP, okay, if you're building something like an ecosystem that will take millions and you never know if that works. So very usually in the startup world, what we're doing, we're building something small and we're checking if people like it or not. Mm-hmm. Sorry for the interruption.
No. I think that kind of explanation is useful, and I gain from having this kind of explanation as well, right? Like a refresher.
Perfect.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up a piece of advice that someone else told me. Mm-hmm. It's more like a reminder than advice. I think for founders at a very early stage and you're building your team, maybe you hire first person or first 3 people or something. It's only, if things go well, it's only going to get more, right? The reminder is that when you're the founder, you're the leader. Mm-hmm. And the leader's role is unfortunately also to make tough decisions and hard decisions at times, and to know that it's okay when you make hard decisions. It's going to suck, it's going to feel like shit. But it is your job to make hard decisions. You're not wrong to make hard decisions. It just doesn't feel good.
Yep.
Yeah.
As a human.
As a human. So I think that's one of the things that resonated with me when I spoke to one of my founders.
Perfect. Thank you for that one. Yeah. For me personally, that was one of the very difficult points on my learning curve with the startups. So I do understand that you're looking right now only for the climate things. Is there any generalization? Maybe there's none. But one of the questions I got, as an investor, what makes you interested in specific startup, like in this particular idea?
For me, climate is a big problem. It's the biggest problem of our generation.
And there will be thousands of startups. So how do you pick?
We pick based on, first of all, what the idea brings in terms of impact. Mm-hmm. When it's scaled, what is the impact on the environment? We don't like to use one single metric, so sometimes we look within their field. So in terms of water, at scale, how much water can you filter, let's say, and provide clean drinking water at scale? Or what kind of cost can you bring down to provide the same amount of drinking water? That's the first filter and the most important filter. The second one actually is more internal looking. And I think that differentiates what angel investors, or at least how I function as angel investor versus say how a VC would do it. It's very important to me how I can help the startup.
Okay.
So
what impact you make?
What impact that I can make.
Okay.
Right. Whether it's bringing in networks, whether it's building a strong enough relationship that they trust me enough to come to me at downtimes. So I kind of make this kind of gauges as I build the relationship with the startup, and if it's strong and I know that, hey, we can partner in the long run and they will share their ups and their downs, especially their downs, with me, so that I can be a supporting figure sometime in the future, then I would tend to prefer having that sort of relationship and investing in the company.
Understandable. There will be downtimes. Everybody has the downtimes in this industry. It's not, you're never right at the first place. So, okay. So, from your perspective, I know as an angel investor you might have a different risk approach to the things, but there will be founders that are part of the accelerator programs or incubators at the very beginning. Do you think it's worth it? Does it help at all?
It definitely helps, but it depends on who is the recipient, right? If it didn't help, there would not be such a big ecosystem. I think accelerators and incubators serve a key role in the ecosystem. There will be startups that say that, it was a few months of my time and I learned a bit here and there, but it was quite time-consuming or resource-consuming. And I get it, and maybe that wasn't a good fit for the founder. But in terms of pushing the ecosystem forward, I think it highlights a lot of what is happening. And it brings to the surface what's next and what is interesting to investors, because then, especially at the end when you do demo days and it's public, hopefully it's public, you get to hear about the concerns of investors, and you get to hear if it's, let's say, there's some sort of corporate sponsor where there's some strategic alignment, right? Like, let's say ports, port-based accelerator, so looking at like water around the ports and ships and whatnot. You get to understand what they are prioritizing and how that impacts the general, for me, climate, right? So I think that these platforms, accelerators and incubators, give me a feel of the space and also the country, because they are often country level, if for the in-person ones. Where it doesn't fit, I think that's the part that's on the startup to determine, right? Where are you now in your development? Are you, if you had the time back from the accelerator,
what do you do?
What will you do with it? Right? I think sometimes accelerator, not accelerator, maybe like incubators. Incubators are helpful for people who don't know what to do or what is the next step, and they need a bit more like broad-based, categorical kind of support. Like, from the financing side, how can I improve my education, meet more financiers and investors, and pitch a bit more? And then from the product side, what exactly is a product, right? How do I build a product? Those things are really helpful. But some people can DIY it themselves. Like they are capable of doing that, and I believe that if you can do it yourself, why not? And finally, is the cost of the accelerator/incubator program. What are you giving up? In a formal, informal perspective, right? If it's equity, do you need it? Like, what's your cost-benefit ratio for the amount of equity you give up, right? And what's the long-run kind of risk to that? It's good to kind of write a list down just on a piece of paper and evaluate that. And a lot of your gut feeling will also help direct that decision in the end.
Got it. Thank you very much from that perspective. I believe, like, personally, like, some of the accelerators, they're for the people that need to learn the process of pivoting and trying to find out, hey, how to define a product. And from the story that you're telling, I believe some of the founders that you met, they already have a product in their head. So they're like the more product-oriented people that they're probably not capable, or they don't know how to do a startup in the first place. But if you have a people and network around them that will help them to go through the startup way, they're gonna make it. So why waste time, 6 months or 10 months of your life for an acceleration if you can start building already? Do you believe, like, this is a little bit, going off of the topic from the questions from the other people that I met, but do you believe that first to the market is the only way to win?
No. I don't even believe that one winner in the market is the way forward, because the problem that I'm trying to address and be a part of solving is so big. Like, having one person only providing one solution is not sustainable. You need many ways, and you need competition to move things forward, and incentive to scale, like classic economics. And it's also a gut feeling, like having one winner, not something that I appreciate. And first to market is, I think there are many, how should I put it? Perhaps in the space that I focus on, which is a lot more hardware, like in climate, solving climate problems often is a physical issue. You need a physical solution, right? There are often multiple first to markets. It's just about discovery, right? Because the scaling and the marketing doesn't work the same as software, and I don't believe that first to market is the best approach. It's the best approach.
So at the beginning of the road, you're meeting a founder, the founder has an idea, the idea resonates with you, and then there is a moment to build a team around it. So you need to choose the people, find out who do you really need, and so on and so on. So what is the most important, from your perspective, of course, when you're building a team for a specific startup?
I like these kind of questions because I feel like my answer is often not on like the textbook. There's so many textbooks on leadership and team building and all that stuff, right? The way I see it is from the reverse side of things. Like, when you're building the team, find people that you can fight well with. Like,
Okay.
you fight healthily because arguments are going to be there. When you have 3 people trying to build like one thing and everyone is bearing a lot of amount of personal risks, like there's going to be sparks, there's going to be arguments and anger and disagreements. Building a team that fights well, ideally even like fights productively, which is rare, I think, is something to take note of, right? Because when things are going well, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
When shit hits the fan, like who's the one who mops it up, right? And who's the one who can continue to work while it smells bad? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
And you get the pressure.
Yeah, all the kind of dynamics around things being bad. I think that's where you really test the team, and that's something to be quite sensitive to when building the team.
I love the term. Find people that you fight well with, and yeah, that's the very productive outcome. Okay, so we were talking about how do you measure the potential of the startup. Whenever you were talking about creating, I believe you're looking at the startups that are quite related to some domains. So you're looking for the people that are related to materials, and sometimes there will be other specialists that are coming from the different cultures. So let's say we're focusing on the recycle process for some plastics or whatever, and you have to mix and match a team that is very multicultural. Do you have any pieces of advice for working in a multicultural environment?
I think it goes back to our previous question on leadership, right? Like what makes a good leader? When you are in a new startup, I think many of the first hires are also leaders in their own way. They are given the responsibilities over a big part of the company. And the advice was to always have the open ear, right? Even if something you hear doesn't fit your appetite, you have to understand, give time to listen and see why an opposing view was brought to the table. And it is through this kind of discussions that if you get stuck on these kind of discussions, you cannot move on with execution.
Right.
So the best thing, I think the best thing to do is actually give it time and attention to peacefully move forward, understand where cultures are different, people are different, and move on with execution.
Okay. Yeah. Like that's the skill that you're getting over the time, and I believe like that's one of the very important things to scale up the startups. And I have personally experienced it in different places where I work with different people that I work with, because that's a value that's paying back a lot over the time with the scale. The more people you're having from different places, that helps a lot.
How did you deal? Like, what was the situation?
So I've been working with a startup with like 50 people, then 500 people, and so on. And depending on the culture that you're crashing with, there are people that have different work styles, and they have very different communication styles. Some of the people were shy. Some of the other people needed that they were really in the situation when they need to control what you're doing, and so on. So once you're able to reveal the types of personalities they are, you can adapt to different cultures. And in my experience, I've been working quite a lot with the people from the South Korea. When there's a specific, as I was working with Samsung, there were specific ways to manage people. As I was working more with the Western cultures, like with people from Spain, from the US, and so on, that's a totally different approach. And I have seen people that were living with like some kind of blue screens in their head, because they're like, hey, how they don't understand what I'm saying. But it just takes time, and I do believe this is one of the opportunities that is great, like from your perspective of traveling and meeting people, because it's so much easier when you're meeting, in physical to make the relation and come to a conclusion with that. So that's gonna be my very, very quick answer to that.
No, I think that's super relevant, and if anything, it highlights as well, like being able to appreciate that the necessity for that skill set of listening and understanding and sometimes taking a step back to evaluate the situation. That's a skill that already takes effort to build, right, as a person. The tougher challenge is to then train the team to build their own kind of approach to it, because they will have their own style of dealing with it. that is the challenge for as the startup scales. Yeah.
I believe like this is one of the values that is very important. When you're building a new thing, when you're building a startup, you need to set up a culture. And a lot of things that the startup is gonna create depends on the culture of creating things and culture of collaborating. Do you have any experience or your take on the different cultures that you were observing within the startups?
Well, the honest answer is that many of the startups I work with don't have that many people.
Okay.
So I think to say that there is a culture, that there will be a culture, but I think that in itself will evolve once they add even just 2 people to the team.
Because that's a huge mix, right?
Yeah. So I think versus saying what I observe in the team's culture, and I think I would share something that one of the founders shared with me about culture, and that culture is this. It's soft, right? It's built on a lot of behaviors, but there are things there are ways that you can develop it and all the content outside to test out with your own company, and you have your own style of doing it. But ultimately, not forgetting that culture is so important, because culture is why people stay in your company.
Yep.
And at early stage startups, like 5 people, if one person doesn't stay, that's 20% of stuff gone. 20% needing to be retrained, and 80, excluding yourself, like 60% that will be affected by the departure.
Yeah.
So
that's the performance impact, and the people start asking questions, and you're like, that's a huge impact.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Jia, you're still staying in Poland, so I want to send a message for everybody that wants to pitch you in Poland, like, hey, in the description, I'm going to leave a link to the Turn On Ventures. I'm going to leave a link to your LinkedIn. Also to Tomasz, who connected me with you. Thank you very much for that, Tomasz. So whenever you would like to pitch something to Jiu, I believe like they're free to go. So how long you're gonna stay in Poland since now? Because I mean, the now will be the moment when we release the video. I hope we're gonna release it soon. But
I mean, I think it's less so about me being in Poland. I will be here for another 2 weeks.
Okay.
In Kraków, but the world is an international place.
Yeah, everybody can use the remote meeting.
Yeah, exactly. So feel free to reach out. There's also a form on my website that you can sort of submit a description and your pitch deck and all that. And when the capacity comes up, I would look through all of that and reach out as well.
That's perfect solution. What can I tell you from my perspective of being a serial founder that did not succeed that much, but I'm still having some of my startups. I will be pitching them to you in a minute. The more feedback you get, the better, because that's the only way to learn. So yeah, if you're gonna have the capacity, please use it. I believe there's a lot of value in that. So, Jia, thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I hope that we're gonna meet on your next trip through the Europe. So, I wish you all the best with meeting the best founders and making the great ventures. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mateusz. Hey.
Cheers.
Great time. Thank you.